Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome once again to the Daily Fantasy Whiff. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Josh Shepardson at BChad50. As we do on Saturdays, we're talking fades and stacks, so we'll go through each game, give you whether we're targeting the pitcher, whether we're targeting offense, if we're targeting both sides, all that good stuff. So we'll start off here, Atlanta versus Washington. At Washington, Gio Gonzalez versus Shelby Miller. Probably the one game on tonight's slate that actually has two decent starting pitchers. So for me, I mean, you can stack the Washington side because they're good and they've been hitting the ball recently. However, this is also Shelby Miller, who is the best of all of these pitchers, actually by quite a bit against right-handed pitching this season, right-handed batters this season. 247 WOBA allowed, mostly right-handers in this lineup outside of Bryce Harper, and even he's just drawing a ton of walks right now because no one wants to pitch to the guy. So you can go with a mini stack of Washington if you want. On my end, I think that's fine. I'm not stacking Atlanta because quite frankly, they suck. They're a terrible offense. So, I mean, to be blunt about it, it's mini stack of Washington or nothing for me.
Yeah, and the price points aren't super great for getting these Nationals bats in there. You're paying a lot for. I mean, Zimmerman's been hot, but it's a righty-righty matchup with Miller. As you noted, a lot of right-handed bats in that Nationals lineup. I expect Miller to be very careful with Harper tonight because he is the lone left-handed bat that can do damage against him. So, not a stack that I love. Odds makers don't love the offenses in this either, with signing a over-under total to the Nationals of 4 runs and less than that for the Braves. So a couple of offenses that don't project to do much. The pitchers look like the better options here, but I don't feel great about either one in terms of upside or anything like that. Miller's backed by a bad offense. It's going to be tough for him to get a win. Gio Gonzalez just isn't pitching deep into games, so I'm just mostly avoiding the pitching. I'm mostly avoiding this game altogether.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Next up, Danny Salazar versus Alfredo Simon at Comerica Park, 8-run total. Salazar minus 160 favorite. This has been to be honest, a terrible offense in Detroit recently. They've been mowed down by much worse pitchers than Salazar. Obviously, he has a big strikeout upside. But with that being said, he does have issues with serving up the long ball. So I think both sides viable stacks. Alfredo Simon is a guy who has, throughout his career, been good against right-handed batters, bad against lefties, but throughout the past month and most of this season, he has just been god-awful. So, Indians, I know your favorite stack, so why don't you take the lead here?
Yeah, I mean, they just have a plethora of left-handed bats to throw at Simon. It starts at the top with Kipnis, who's one of the best values at second base tonight. You've got Francisco Lindor, shortstop, Michael Brantley, Carlos Santana, Lonnie Chisenhall, and the list goes on and on. I love the Indians tonight. They are my favorite stack, including the Coors Field games, just because the price points are so vastly different. You can do more with the Indians, and they carry a 4.5-run over/under total. So odds makers definitely seeing that left-handedness of the lineup, seeing what Simon's been doing lately, a lot to like there. I do think the Tigers are a viable contrarian stack because, as you noted, when Salazar gets in trouble, it's with power, and Miguel Cabrera, JD Martinez, they can supply some power. It should be a low-owned stack because they haven't been in the greatest of form lately, but also because Danny Salazar is going to be one of the more popular pitchers on the slate. So I don't mind that as a contrarian stack at all. If you're only playing a handful of lineups, it's certainly not at the top of my list, but if you're playing a number of lineups, that's the type of contrarian stack that has big upside that can carry you to the top of the standings. But as I said, Indian stack, my favorite of the evening.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. Next up, New York Mets at the Miami Marlins, Bartolo Colon versus Brad Hand. Two very average pitchers. Colon has had his time, but that time has come and gone. He has his moments, but 8-run total here, minus 140, favorite for Bartolo. And this is a Miami offense that's very cheap. They don't have a lot of power, but I do like some of the bats from this team, especially these left-handed bats that can hit righties very well. Colon does have some issues with lefties, so guys like Derek Dietrich, D. Gordon, looking at Marcell Ozuna in the outfield as a righty, Christian Yelich. I think that's a good mini stack or a good
Yep.
cheap stack, I should say. One where I'll maybe pair them with Colorado, maybe pair them with the Indians, and then still get decent pitching with them. I think that's a viable stack. Mets also, but not quite as much because they do struggle with left-handed pitching, and Brad Hand's been just good enough that I don't really want to stack against them much.
Yeah, I mean, on the Mets side of things, I could see hooking maybe David Wright and Yoenis Cespedes, possibly throwing Juan Lagares in there depending on where the lineup spot is, but there just aren't a lot of lefty killers in that lineup. Michael Kadire has been good against lefties throughout his career, so I mean, they have a few guys that can hit lefties, but nobody you get super excited about, and they're in a pitcher-friendly ballpark, so more or less, unless you're looking to maybe mini stack or hook a couple guys from that team, I'm certainly not going full-blown stack with the Mets. The Marlins look like the slightly better side there, but again, I'm with you. It's just getting a handful of those lefties together, and it's really to kind of complement a more expensive stack like the Rockies. So, not stacks that I love. There's some viability, but they're low in the pecking order in terms of the stacks that I'm going to be picking from tonight.
Yeah, I agree with you there. White Sox at the Royals. Jose Quintana against Danny Duffy. This one, it has some appeal. An 8-run total, minus 139 favorite for Danny Duffy. We saw Cy Danks show up again last night and dominate this lineup. I don't understand it. It's just one of those things that happens now. But Jose Quintana, not the guy that I'm necessarily trying to stack against because he's an above-average pitcher, but certainly this is a team that still doesn't strike out much. They are a good team against lefties. I mean, they're a good team against righties too, but you got guys like Ben Zobrist, Lorenzo Cain, smash left-handed pitching. Obviously, Kendrys Morales has been hitting well recently, so I think this is a viable, probably a mini stack for me.
Yep.
I think that on the other side, though, Danny Duffy does have some big-time struggles with right-handed batters, so for me, I think you can get some guys in there like Rafael Garcia, Jose Abreu. You mentioned the catchers on the podcast earlier, Tyler Flowers, whoever ends up being in the lineup. So mini stacks for me on this one. I think Quintana is the guy I would play if I had to play one of these pitchers, but I don't even know that I'll be playing him.
Yeah, I just don't see the upside to using a Quintana against an offense that doesn't strike out much.
Yep.
Like you said, I'm not going out of my way to stack against him or pick on him, but Cain and Zobrist do work against lefties, so mini stacking definitely in play. And against Duffy, I just wish there were more talented right-handed bats to throw at him, but the White Sox just don't have a lot of them. You mentioned Abreu, you mentioned Avisail Garcia, the catcher platoon, whichever guy is in there, whether it's Soto or Flowers, is viable as a punt. The only other name that I'll throw out there is Trace Thompson. So depending on how this lineup shakes out, maybe you go a mini stack of the two-quarter outfielders plus Abreu, but that's about as far as I'm willing to extend. And this is at Kauffman. This isn't at home run friendly U.S. Cellular, so that's certainly something else to keep in mind as well. But I like pieces of this game, but it's more along the lines of one-offs than stacking, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, we have Minnesota at Houston. Lance McCullers hosting Irvin Santana. And this one's going to be a fun one. Minus 200 favorite for Lance McCullers. An 8-run total tells you that Vegas is expecting Houston to score some runs, and Minnesota, not so much. Worst road offense in baseball. They do have some pieces that have upside. Guys like Miguel Sano, Brian Dozier. But Lance McCullers has been good. He does give up more hard contact than he'd like, but there's just not a lot of bats you really like on this Minnesota side. I mean, arguably their best hitter outside of Sano and Dozier recently has been Eduardo Escobar, but he continues to bat 8th or 9th, so you're not including him in a stack because you're not wrapping it around because Sano usually bats cleanup. I mean, Trevor Plouffe's an okay option, but for me, I mean, you can make that as a contrarian stack. It's not one I feel great about, but the Houston side, though, we know Irvin Santana, how bad he's been since coming back up. Over the past 30 days, just a 15% strikeout rates. I mean, this is a guy that not missing a lot of bats. Houston has a ton of power, especially at home, so I think that's going to be a nice, fun stack tonight.
Yeah, and the return of George Springer adds some length and some pop to that lineup. Really like Houston. They don't have a ton of lefties to throw at Irvin Santana, which is a bit of a bummer, but guys like Altuve and Springer and Correa offer you power and speed and average and some contact skills, at least in Altuve's sense, not so much Springer's, but I mean, even guys in the middle of the order, middle to bottom, guys like Carlos Gomez and Evan Gattis, I mean, there is length to this lineup, and that's what you like to see. Guys that can reach the seats. It's at Minute Maid Park, so you like the ballpark factors there. I like this Astro stack, and because they are so righty laden and they're facing a righty, it might fly somewhat below the radar. So I think there's some low ownership potential here, but sizable ceiling. So I like the Houston side of things, and I like McCullers as a pitching option too in all game types.
Yeah, and I tend to think that Houston will probably go low because Santana did have a solid performance against them last time out. But like you mentioned, adding George Springer just completely changes that lineup. The guy can do it all. Next up, San Francisco at Colorado. I don't know if you've heard. Coors Field, a pretty good place to stack hitters, so we'll keep this one simple for you. Play Carlos Gonzalez, play Nolan Arenado, play whoever the hell else you can fit in your lineup from Coors Field.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dirty little secret in the DFS community that stacking Coors Field tends to be profitable.
Yep. Get on it before everyone else does.
Yeah, there's a reason that these price points go through the roof when there's a game at Coors Field. It's not an accident. It's not DFS sites not knowing what they're doing. So it's definitely a viable stack. There's not a lot of expensive pitching. I prefer the Rocky side of this, but the Giants have been an awesome offense against right-handed pitching this year, so you can certainly get them in against Chad Bettis. I stack either side of this. You really can't go wrong, but as I said, Rockies are my preferred side of that, and that's going to probably be pretty much the popular opinion, especially with recency bias slipping in, and the Rockies doing more damage in this home set against against the Giants.
Yeah, and it seems like the Giants, I mean, for a team at Coors Field, may actually have a decent amount of lower ownership, because they have been terrible in those first couple games. So next up, the Dodgers at the Padres, the Battle of California. Tyson Ross against Alex Wood. I know both these pitchers are guys we mentioned on the earlier podcast. I love Tyson Ross. He's my favorite pitcher tonight. When you factor in FanDuel price, at least, he's one of the more expensive guys. But this is a Dodgers offense that's just been lost recently. Ross obviously pitching at Petco Park, not a good venue for offense. He also among the league leaders in ground ball rate, home runs per nine, lowest home runs per nine, I should say. So for me, I mean, it's play Ross. You could stack a mini stack of like Upton and Kemp against Wood, but outside of that, I mean, Jed Jerko, I guess, but it's mini stack for Padres or play the pitchers for me.
Yeah, and I like Alex Wood as a cheap option on FanDuel, so I'm really on the pitchers in this one as opposed to the offenses. The Dodgers have been good against righties this year, which would normally give me reason for pause, but as you said, their recent performance hasn't been anything to write home about, and Ross is a very good pitcher. Limits the long ball, so that certainly hurts any stack against him, including this Dodgers stack. And when you factor in Petco Park as well, there's just not a lot to like here. So I'm going to roll with the pitching side of things and go ahead and pass on the hitting side of things, other than maybe some one-offs from that game, but I'm not stacking that.
Yep, I'm with you there. Texas at the Angels, Derek Holland versus Jared Weaver. This one could be interesting, but in past years, you'd be stacking both sides, but Derek Holland has looked fantastic recently. Jared Weaver has not. Jared Weaver, fly ball pitcher. I mean, he's got a fastball in the mid-80s now, Bartolo Colon style. So despite the fact that Texas is not a good road offense, this is an Angels offense that's been struggling. I think if I'm stacking one side, it's going to be the Texas side because they're cheap too.
Cheap. They got a number of left-handed bats to pick on Weaver. Guys like Shin-Soo Choo, Prince Fielder, Rougned Odor. These are guys that I really like quite a bit. So I like that side of things for the stack quite a bit. Even in Los Angeles, we're not talking about playing in a hitter-friendly park like Rangers Ballpark in Arlington, but that's okay. I think it'll suppress the ownership, which is a plus if that stack does go off and you own it. On the Angels side of things, you mentioned Holland pitching really well lately. The Angels offense not playing really well lately, so that's kind of a match made in heaven for Holland. The exact opposite for the Angels offense. So, I mean, you can always hook your Trout and Pujols together. There's never anything wrong with that. But beyond that, it's a lefty-lefty matchup for Cole Calhoun, so you don't like him. And there just aren't lefty mashers really in that Angels lineup. Not at least to add length to that lineup where you feel good about stacking it. So I'm going to go ahead and pass on a stack there. I'm going to use Holland in some quite a few GPPs tonight. And I really like that Rangers side of things.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Seattle at Oakland, final game on the slate. Two pretty good pitchers. One who was very good at times, Felix Hernandez versus Jesse Chavez. Obviously, this one playing at O.co, so not a great venue for offense at all. Huge ballpark. 7.5 run total. Felix Hernandez is a small favorite at minus 125. I'm just going to go ahead and say no thanks. I mean, you could go on the Seattle side, but Chavez is an above-average pitcher. He pitches well at home. So for me, I mean, it's a contrarian stat going with Seattle, but I'm really not a fan of either side.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say odds makers tell you all you need to know here. 7.5 run total with only a small favor for Felix. They're not expecting runs. I'm not expecting runs, and I don't see a lot of viability to stacking either of these offenses, especially with Nelson Cruz nicked up. I mean, that's a big bet that even if he's in the lineup, you figure he's less than 100%. The A's, they just don't look like a very scary offense, especially against Felix tonight. We've seen Felix blow up at times this year, but I just don't see the A's having the bats to make that type of a meltdown happen once again for him. So I'm going to go ahead and pass as well.
Yep, absolutely. And that's going to wrap things up for us. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.